What's going on, man?
Jesse, what's going on, brother?
Oh, dude, another busy day here for sure, but it's good. I'm glad that we're able to get on here a little bit early. So the wife hasn't showed up yet, so perfect. Otherwise, the honey-do list is going to start happening.
And as we all know, the wife is always the realest boss. That's the true boss of everything.
That's the truth. That's the truth for sure.
That's what they don't tell you about being an entrepreneur. That your wife's actually your boss. They didn't tell me that part.
Right. That is the truth. Yeah. Now, finally, after her being the breadwinner earlier on for so many years, now it's the complete opposite. Now, finally, I'm able to get her out of her jobs. Well, now she's just going part-time. So I'm really stoked to finally.
That's a very beautiful thing. If you don't mind, can we I'm gonna introduce you, of course, but later on, I might want to touch on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. First things first, I want to formally invite my guest today. His name is, correct me if I'm saying it wrong, Jesse LeBlanc.
LeBlanc. Yep, that's it.
LeBlanc. Is that French? I'm Haitian now. I like broken girl.
That's funny because one of my employees is also Haitian here, and nice. He's living here in Georgia.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's French Canadian, basically. Yep.
Nice. All right, cool. All right, so basically we have you on today. You've honored us with your time today. The name of the episode is Transactions and Transactional Funding. You happen to be an expert in that subject. We're going to talk about what it is, how you bring value, how it brings value, and all stuff of that nature. But I have a intrusive question first, if you don't mind. This kind of person.
I'm totally open. There's not much that you can't ask that I won't answer. So go for it.
All right. So the main theme of the show, really, we just talk to different millionaires all around the world. Are you a millionaire? And when you became one, to ruin the question, how did it feel?
It didn't happen too long ago, but it didn't change anything, to be honest with you. Matter of fact, the second I kind of recognized it, it was like, oh, okay, well, let's hurry up and start pushing to the next level. Let's push it here, put the money somewhere else. So I never really cared so much about trying to reach any type of level. It just kind of happened. I didn't have like a major goal set up because let's face it, reality strikes, things happen. And I've also been around so many other people and mentored so many people where a lot of people have this specific goal and it's a money thing a lot of times. And I see them focus so much on just trying to reach that figure, that mark in the bank or whatever it might be, whether, that they have that much money in equity or whatever, right? And so they focus so much attention on that. And then something else takes a hit. Relationships usually number one.
Facts.
And so I've kind of gotten away from focusing on, just one specific goal. It's kind of more of like several goals that take a lot longer. And I don't expect to make anything happen within a month or within a year, just gradually making things happen. So honestly, by the time I realized that it had already been months and months beforehand. And I'm just like, oh, okay, well, I guess it probably would have been kind of cool and exciting to have known when I hit that mark. But at the same point, clearly it didn't change who I am or anything. So why should I even care about that anymore? So I have a completely different mindset on that. And so many people, usually the folks that aren't at that level yet, they feel like it's going to change who they are or they're going to like be some better person. And I don't like to think like that.
Raising my hand.
Yeah.
Raising my hand. I'm definitely guilty of that. It's definitely a goal of mine. That dollar amount, the $1 million, is definitely a goal of mine. And I actually patterned my whole life around it to the point where I think I lose myself. Like you're saying, like I lose myself within the goal instead of like kind of embracing the moment of what's going on, the special people in my life that I have in my life, and instead of what I don't have. So that it was triggering what you're saying in a good way because I felt what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna. If it's a goal, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with having that goal, but let's be real about it and let's not let it be like the number one goal, because I can tell you the second someone gets to a million, let's say $1 million or 10 million or whatever it might be. Those types of people are always going to have that next goal. How can I get to 10 million? How can I get to 1 billion?
Absolutely.
How can I get, it's never going to freaking end, and they'll never enjoy
Thanks, man.
the journey. They're never going to enjoy the process. They're only going to be stuck in that $1 amount. Their kids, their family, their friends, everyone else is only going to be hearing about this stupid dollar amount that really means nothing to everybody else.
That is a fact, man. And again, hey, Jesse, again, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for blessing us with your time today. I know you are a very busy man. You illustrated that you had so many closings the other day, that you had one that you had to run out at the last minute. So trust me, I understand how busy you can get, man. So thank you again from the bottom of my heart, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about transactional funding. Can you please describe for my audience and yours what that is and how it helps wholesalers at all?
Sure. So just briefly, so that way people can kind of understand, hey, where did this guy come from? Why does he know about transactional funding? I've been in the real estate business since 2014, so relatively new, only 7 going on 8 years or so. Actually, yeah, I've already hit my 7, so yeah, going into 8 years now. Before that, I used to work in finance and marketing. I was a financial analyst, a marketing analyst, worked for Hewlett-Packard, Red Bull, a couple other larger corporations. Left that and then went to took a significant pay cut and went into the police force and was a police officer here in DeKalb County, just outside of Atlanta. Finally got away from that and the corruption and whatnot back in 2014. And 2014 is when I started my company. So I started flipping and still flip to the day, but barely any flips these days. Went from flipping into wholesaling, ran a wholesale business, ran a wholesale company, still flipping, buying rentals. So I got a large portfolio, every day building that. And then, of course, naturally, just this last year, decided, well, as a wholesaler and a wholesale company myself, there's a lot of other people that are out there, a lot of folks that I mentor that have always needed transactional funding for their wholesale deals. So I started kind of putting my money to work and some other of my friends' money and some of my family's money. As a matter of fact, I'm borrowing some family members' money just to kind of help them out. Some friends' money, again, just to kind of give them a much higher return on their money from where they had it before. So A, it's going to help me out, and B, I love adding value and trying to help out some of my other friends and family. So that's kind of how I got into.
For you, we had the value giver.
Yeah. Oh man, it's all about that. Like if you, and I'm not going to lose focus, but I will kind of get off point here a little bit. Everybody at some point in time in their life, unless they're extremely greedy and selfish, people will realize that the more you give, the reality is the more you are actually going to get back. Now, especially if you're not giving with the intention of expecting things back. The only way that, and I'm going to go off on so many tangents, the only way that someone can ever be disappointed, and think about this, the only way that you can ever be disappointed is if you had some form of expectation. So if you're giving to somebody and you don't get something back, you're going to be disappointed. If you're giving just from your heart and knowing that you're giving because at some point in time you're going to get something back, it doesn't have to be monetary. It could be a text on a day that you're having a bad day and that person remembers you and sends you a really nice text. That alone right there is value given to you. That's a return that you could get because you gave somebody value. So always focus on others and their value. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be focused on yourself. You clearly need to make sure that you take care of yourself first, because if you don't know who you are, don't respect yourself, don't appreciate yourself, and don't understand the value that you are to yourself, you can't provide anything for anybody else. So yeah, I'm naturally always giving. That's just like my forefront. That's what's always on mind, no matter what it is. Very positive, and trying to give as often as I can, as long as it's not distracting me and taking me away from the high priority things that I still have to do, which is then going to give me the time to be able to give to others.
So basically, whenever a guy texts his crush, don't expect the text back. As long
right,
as you
exactly. Nailed it. Hey, if he or she does respond, you get excited. It's great. But if they don't, just write it out. Go to the next day. See what happens. Right.
As long as you give value and don't worry about the end result, you're good to go.
Yep, absolutely. So going back to the transactional, so here I am giving, and it just kind of naturally progressed into what I do now. And the company is Wholesalers Transactional Funding.
Okay.
And transactional funding, for anybody who's watching that doesn't know what that is, you as a wholesaler, if you are ever faced with a situation at a closing to where you can't do an assignment, an assignment is you've got the contract with your seller, and now you are assigning your contract to an end buyer. There's cases where you need to do a double close. So you have to close on your transaction, and then you're going to have a second closing with your end buyer. So that's called a double closing or a back-to-back closing.
Thanks.
There's different names for it, but it's all the exact same thing. And so there's either a state that does not allow a double closing without you bringing your own funds to the initial closing, which is what we call the A to B closing. Or there's some attorneys where even if in a state it is legal to do a double closing and the attorney is able to use the end buyer's funds to fund your closing, we call that pass-through funding, using your end buyer's funds that are sitting in escrow to cover your initial purchase. So if the attorney doesn't allow that or the state doesn't allow that, then you have to bring your own funds to closing. Now, most of us as wholesalers, we generally don't have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting in our bank to be able to cover your initial closing. So that's when you would reach out to a transactional lender. And at that point in time, I would then step in and fund your A to B or your first closing. So whatever amount that you would have to bring to the closing table, the gross amount from you as the buyer that you have to bring, I'll cover that amount. And generally it's a same day, kind of a 1 day loan, if you will. It's a very, very, very short term transactional loan. Mm-hmm. And then on the second closing, our fee is on the second closing. So therefore you still don't have to bring our fee or anything to the initial closing. There's nothing out of pocket that you guys would have to bring. So again, that's more on the transactional lender side for the A to B side of what that really means to you guys as the wholesaler. And I'm seeing a lot of hedge funds nowadays that they've recently changed it. For example, Amherst or Tiber, for example, some of them are changing it to where they're not allowing the pass-through funding and they're forcing wholesalers to use transactional lending. And I don't know exactly why. They've probably been burnt somewhere, something's happened, and they're starting to tighten up on their criteria. So I'm seeing that happen a lot. And then, of course, more states like Oklahoma, North Carolina is a big one. That North Carolina in July of 2021, the North Carolina bar changed their laws for real estate attorneys, and they will no longer allow what we call as blind HUDs or pass-through funding. And they require you to either A, bring your own funds to your closing or to use transactional funding. So that's been recently a change that has definitely caused a lot of stress for some wholesalers lately.
All right, and just to follow up on your explanation there, for transactional funding, for the naysayers that there's like 500 to 1,000 wholesalers in every town that's birthed every day, right? And I remember when I first started wholesaling, and most people who started wholesaling, their main thing was it's too good to be true. So for those kind of people with that kind of ill-advised mindset, what do you say to them to say, what does Jesse get out of this? I personally know, but for a lender, what does Jesse get out of lending me the money? And it's no cash out of my pocket. So what does Jesse get out of it? What's the percentage return that he gets for this 1% loan?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I'm here to do it for two reasons. One, to make money and help my wife get out of her job. And two, to obviously provide value for all my other wholesalers that are out there and allow them to still be able to close that deal. So if they're faced with a situation where they can't close the deal without transactional funding, that's where I come in. So at least you know that your deal is going to be funded, closed, and at least you can still create your spread versus losing the deal completely. So my fee structure is a 1% fee structure of whatever the amount is that I send over. If it's anything below $100,000 loan, I just have a flat fee structure of $1,000. then the only other fee is a $30 wire fee. But I don't have any other application fees. There's no credit checks or anything of that, because we're not actually giving you like a long-term or a short-term loan that is like a rehab or a hard money loan. So the property's not being vetted. We're not vetting you. We're not doing credit checks or anything. Generally speaking, my money is for the most part protected by the end buyer's funds if I run it correctly. Now, there are some cases where with the hedge funds a lot of times will not fund their purchase until the A to B side, the first closing, is done. That puts me at a lot of risk, because let's say that I send my funds on Monday at 10 o'clock and it takes until Monday at 3 o'clock for the closing company to record the deed. Now they send the money to the initial seller. So now the seller leaves, seller has their money, the property's recorded. Now it's Tuesday. Now all of a sudden a tree falls on the house Tuesday night or Monday night. Tuesday, the hedge fund says, oh, nope, we don't want to buy the house anymore. Now I'm literally stuck with a loan with you guys, and I'm risking a deal that I've never done any kind of homework on it. So those are the ones that are super risky, and I could right away lose a lot of money. So it is really risky, but that's usually why I try to wait for the end buyer to fund and sign all the closing docs first. But there are some cases where I don't. So again, my fee structure is a 1% of whatever it is that we loan to you guys, and then a $30 wire fee. And then I try not to do them same day, because it usually kind of pisses off the closing company, because they have to change HUD. They've got to, like, now all of a sudden there's a lender involved. There's a lot more emails. There's a lot more work. But we can do it same day. Matter of fact, I just had one yesterday where everything was already closed. The end buyer's funds were already there. And last second, the title company dropped the bomb on them and was like, oh yeah, no, you have to bring your own money to closing. So of course, within about 2 or 3 hours of this specific wholesaler calling me, we already had all the paperwork done, negotiated everything with the closing company, got it all squared away, got it funded, and received our wire, and the wholesaler was able to close the deal out and get their spread. Otherwise, they were just going to have to walk away and lose the deal.
Beautiful. And for those that don't know, there's going to be a lot of times as a wholesaler where you may run into a deal where you don't want the seller finding out how much you're making a deal. So that may be another reason why you do a double closing. And the beauty of what you do, the leverage that you bring to the table, is not only is it clearing out your personal goals for you and your spouse, it clears out the biggest problem that not even just wholesalers, all entrepreneurs have. That's the money in between deals. So the service you're providing actually gives you the money you're missing to close the exact deal. I love the fact that you even had I'm actually a big fan of you and everything you do already. But I love the fact that you were able to monopolize and leverage the idea and become the lender yourself, knowing the value that it brings to others.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been put in so many situations where I was stressed back in the day, and like calling everybody, like, who can fund this? Who can fund this? And usually early on, before people know who you are, it's kind of hard for someone to just out of nowhere send you $200,000 or $300,000 just by a handshake and I'll pay you back. So
it takes a while to get to that level.
It sure as heck does. And so before I even knew what transactional lending was back in the day, here I am just losing some deals because I didn't know any better. And so that was another reason why it's like, I don't want other wholesalers to have to go through that scenario. I want them to know that there are other opportunities out there. But you brought up a great point that I did forget about, just because I'm so used to dealing with a lot of other scenarios. But yes, there are cases where you might want to double close for the purpose of not disclosing to your seller what your proceeds are, what your profit is. And same thing with your end buyer, not wanting your end buyer to know how much money you just made off of them. Now, clearly, we all know a really good end buyer shouldn't care how much you make. But regardless of how great your end buyer is, it doesn't necessarily mean that your seller is also going to have the same mindset and thought behind it as your end buyer. And
Yeah,
then of
it's
course,
a tangled web that we weave in that regard.
that's exactly right. I mean, you should always be as transparent as you can. If you can assign deals and not have to use transactional funding, I always say go for that, because you want your seller to be on the same page as you. You want your buyer to be on the same page as you, because you want those referrals. You always want to be transparent and honest. But we all, let's face it. Sometimes you can be as honest as you can, and your value, even if you're going to make 15 grand, the value that you're bringing that seller, you provided them the solution to their problem. You're helping them get out of whatever it is that they're facing. So you should, you deserve the money that you make for all the hard work that you spent, the marketing dollars, the time invested. But unfortunately, some people still don't recognize the value that you as wholesalers bring to the table. And that would be a scenario where you might just want to be like, look, I'm providing them the value, I'm solving their problems. If I let them know what the spread is, it might just cause a whole nother world of issues. So I'm just going to go ahead and double close, let everybody else continue on with their life. They're happy, I'm happy, and my end buyer's happy.
Absolutely. And you also touched on something in the beginning of our conversation I want to circle back to. It hit me home a lot because I actually had a situation that was similar. Now I'm not married, I'm not as lucky as a man, but the end result and the story is still important. You stated you're doing this mainly to help retire your wife or make sure she doesn't work. Is that something that and you also stated that the shoe was on the other foot before, where she was paying most of the bills and she believed in you. At that time, did you ever foresee yourself getting to this point where you're a millionaire and you're close to 70% getting her free? Or what was your state of mind? Real state of mind is the name of the company. What was your state of mind while you were trying to get to that point? And what's your state of mind now? And how important it is for you to retire her for that same reason?
Yeah, so I mean, several years ago, I was able to pay off the rest of her student loan debt. So she had
Beautiful, man.
She had like 200 and something thousand, and then we worked some of it off. And then several years ago, I was able, it was like 3 years ago, I think we paid off another 150K or so. So she was completely done with that. She always saw me just working and working and working. What's that?
I said, pardon my French, and I'm a Haitian, so that's real man shit, brother. I like.
Oh
that.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could have actually used that money to do stuff like this and made more money from it. But when you have someone like her with a W-2 mentality, all they see is I owe money and I don't want to have debt, so pay it off. They don't understand that you could actually use money and make money from it at a much higher rate of return or a higher interest rate, and then use what you're making to more quickly pay off that other debt instead of like a big one lump sum. But at the end of the day, even though I knew that, I still took care of her, because that was her only way of, okay, that has to be done before I do XYZ. And so I just sucked it up and did that. So now recently, as a matter of fact, January 8th is her last day. And then she is just going to be working part-time whenever she wants to work, like if she's bored. But now she's free from working if she chooses to, which gives us the ability to now travel hopefully like once a month, which is something we were already kind of doing before COVID. So we're going to get back into traveling at least once a month if we can. But now
make sure when you guys do, you travel safe, man. And if nobody said this before, man, I'm so genuinely proud of you for being able to do that. I know that was a personal goal earlier. I'm so happy for you and you and your spouse. And you struck gold with what you said, man, because you said with a W-2 mentality. A lot of times when two people are together and one has entrepreneur aspirations and they're living with somebody who's a 9-to-5 person, like you said, like you so eloquently stated, it's very hard for the W-2 minded individual to see past their debts and what's going on to that 9-to-5 situation. So how did you, because I know when you were doing it, you weren't working when you were in the less fortunate situation, right? You weren't working at the time, right?
I wasn't working at what time?
At the time where she was paying most of the bills.
So when I first started that out, up until just a few years ago, it was still just grinding, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning till probably 10:30 at night, almost every single day for several years. So it took a lot of hard work. This, none of this just happened overnight. Certainly didn't happen over 2 or 3 years. It's been a lot of work. During that time, there was really no sense in trying to explain to her what I'm doing, or it's like what will happen, because she's one of those, I'll believe it when I see it, not
Absolutely.
I'm going to
As most
support
women
you
are.
on your way.
As most women are.
So it is tough. And to constantly, I'm not going to say that I never had the support. She's just a really tough type person to where she's not really going to show the support. But now that she's finally able to get away from her work, she's like not a completely different person, just like 10x what she used to be. And I see so many things much happier. Our life is so much better. Everything is so much better. And I finally reached the goal that I wanted. So now it's like, hey, instead of having this huge major goal, this next major goal, I want to continue just compounding what we already have, but compounding it without the point of taking more time from me. I want to continue compounding what I have now and enjoy both of our journeys right now without adding more to it. And that's one thing that I really enjoy. Again, if you had that, hey, I want to be at $10 million, guess what? I would still be humping and grinding every day. So then once I met whatever goal I was at, now I can't sit back and enjoy what I'm doing. Now, I don't say sit back and do nothing, but once you get to a certain level, you can delegate stuff. You can let things work for you. You don't always have to be the one out there working unless you have that next goal. And it's always good to have next goals, but sometimes your next goal doesn't have to be completed by yesterday. So allow you to still enjoy that journey while you're living where you're at in today. But yeah, so she for several years as a pharmacist and a doctor, she was working full time with another part-time job. So clearly, as someone who's making, 130 to 170,000 dollars a year, certainly beat me as a new investor starting out for several years. And then even once I was a wholesaler, obviously we all know we can make really good money. But again, naturally, what I was doing was making that money, and then I immediately put it back into the business. All I did was invest all of it. I never put any of it in my own pockets, which now looking back, I never suggest to anybody. You should always take yourself out. You should take your family out or your spouse out or whatever. Take a little bit of that profit and actually use it. Reward yourself, reward your family. So then that way you can always, like every month or whatever, you can always reward yourself, even if it's just a small reward. You're rewarding yourself for the hard work you've done versus letting an entire year go by. You're just busting your ass. And at the end of the year, you're like, what did I gain from it? Oh, well, I grew my business a little bit. Okay, that's great, which really just means you probably added more stress, more people. You're making more money, but now you also have more expenses. But did you actually use any of it to your benefit? Nope, didn't vacation, didn't go do anything, didn't buy anything for myself. That's not a very good life to have. So no matter how little you make, still reward yourself.
These words are so triggering, man. Like I got myself to a point where I made more money than I did the year prior, but I thought I was what I thought I was doing it, and it was building my business. I did grow, I did outsource. I'm not gonna not pat myself in the back there, but what ended up happening was as much that was coming in was coming out between everything I started doing, between my investors, between my employees, between the virtual assistants, between the marketing, like as much money that's coming in was coming out. And now I'm basically figuring a way out of that now. So I got to the point where I reached the goal, but now I have to like reset, recalculate, and basically do everything all over, but with a outsourced mindset. And that's why with transactional funding stuff that you're doing now, and it kind of makes it where closing a wholesale deal is kind of the easiest thing to do now, because the one thing that myself or any other wholesalers would always run into if it was any kind of problem, like the hardest part is getting the seller to say yes. After that's whatever, once you get the numbers.
Yep.
But if there was any kind of problem, it was where can I find the money to do a double closing? Where can I find the money for the earnest money deposit? And what you're doing with your company and your likeness and your brand now is letting you know, let everyone know that you can actually close with me same day at this percentage. And there's no bullshit. There's no nothing. It's good business. And I love the fact that you're able to do that while still clearing your own personal goals. Now, I have another intrusive question, Jesse, but you have to keep it real.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. So again, transform us back to when things weren't going bad and she's making all this money and working 2 jobs. Did she tell you to get a job, and yet did she ever reach a point where she got tired of supporting you and let that, maybe she didn't verbalize it, she wasn't so friendly in the bedroom, or during checkers, whatever the case may be. We need stories like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I was still, don't get me wrong, I was still a W-2 employee of my own company.
Okay.
So I still naturally were bringing in money. So it's not like she had nothing to do with my business. She never put a penny towards the business. She's never really helped do anything with the business. Matter of fact, she probably didn't even really want to hear too much about what I had. And the main reason why is because that's all I knew. From 7 o'clock in the morning till 10:30 at night, that was my life. That's all I knew. So that was kind of like my goal, my dreams, my hopes. And at that time, for many, many, many years, from outside looking in, I was just a one-sided person. And so that was more frustrating to her than anything else. So yeah, she was never supporting like my work or like sending me money or anything like that. But obviously I'm living under the roof of the house, and she was the one paying the mortgage and then some of the bills. And then outside of that, obviously we would share groceries, share going out and things like that. So it's not like she was 100%, 100% supporting all of that. It was just more of like, hey, I'm doing my own thing. She's doing her own thing. But as far as the majority of the utilities and bills, Mama took care of that kind of stuff. And then, she's just always here if I needed her on something, but she's also not going to give me much of a time of day if it had to do with work. Like, I don't want to hear it. If you're complaining so much about how stressful your day was, then you could go do something else. She's never the type of person that's like, hey, you should just go get another job. You suck at this. You're not going to do it. Even whenever I was in the police force, she would tell all of our other friends, she's like, hey, Jesse's probably going to die, but that's his dumbass choice. If he wants to be a police officer, go ahead and do you. Other than that, like, I can't tell him what to do, and I'm not going to make him do something. So you do whatever you want to go do.
Was the police officer thing something you want to do since a child? And what made you leave that mainly?
Kind of. So I kind of had I told myself I had one chance, and I was able to get in. And I mean, I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely loved it. But there was certainly a lot of corruption. There was a lot of, throwing stuff under the bus. And after I had informed some higher ups of several situations, one situation specifically that haunted me for many, many, many years after that was watching 2 police officers, a white officer and a black officer, beating, literally kneeing and punching a 17-year-old who is still an adult. But regardless, if you're 10 years old, 20 years old, 80 years old, if you're handcuffed, game over. You don't freaking touch anybody. And they chose.
What's the minority of the 17-year-old? Was he black?
He was a black man. Yep.
Okay.
He was a black man. So we had one black officer and one white officer that were both kneeing and punching this guy. And I immediately, once I saw it, I thought, long story short, they had the guy bent over the back of the car, but his hands were behind his back, and it appeared from a distance that maybe that this guy was maybe reaching for one of the police officers' guns or a weapon. So I naturally jump out of my car and run up to kind of help the officers out. And the second I noticed that the guy had his handcuffs on, I immediately stopped where I was at. And those officers also stopped and said something to me. And then I just walked off because clearly I was not going to be a part of that. And I recognized that the guy was handcuffed. And so split-second decision immediately told me this is not right. This is wrong. And I remember walking around, pacing around, crying, not knowing what the hell to do because I just got finished seeing 2 of my other fellow officers doing something that I knew was horribly wrong. So long story short, I was locked in a room. GBI was there. I was there for hours and hours, from like 2:30 until about 11 o'clock at night, being investigated and everything. And by the time I got out, they had already stripped the officers of all their gear and they took them to jail and everything. So then I had several more years of dealing with that, going back and forth through courts. And then the final straw was dealing with the sovereign citizen. And they basically tried to say that I made a false arrest and violated her rights, etc. And she faked some seizures and faked some stuff. And that took another 3 years. And they finally realized that I was not at fault for anything I did. And they just tried to get me to sign some paperwork, basically admitting that I did some things wrong, and I refused to do it. And luckily, I was one of the only officers, one of the very few officers that had my own audio equipment, dash cam, etc. So I was able to prove everything that I had and did. And that's when they realized, oh crap, they're in trouble for what they did and what they saw and what they said. And so next thing I know, for several years, the sovereign citizen was still out to get me. And after about 3 or 4 years of maybe losing my house, maybe losing my car, maybe losing my business, maybe losing my, my spouse, everything over all these lawsuits, they finally, when I gave them all of my documentation, my videos, my audio, and everything, then they dropped the case off of me and then went after the county for all the lying. So I just was like, you know what, this is it. I got to get away from the corruption.
I appreciate every single bit of that story for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the elephant in the room is I'm Black, so I'm not. Growing up, I was always, it's like speaking for us, man, speaking for Black men, just because we're here, man. I like when a Black man and a white man can have these kinds of conversations, especially with you being a former police enforcer. And myself just going through whatever. I've been placed in situations where they said I did things I didn't do. Yep. So like they had me in jail for crime I never committed. I've got videos on Facebook of like just pure harassment. So just hearing, I would say you're the first Caucasian man that ever honestly, especially being a former police officer, to admit to corruption. So it's just honestly, man, almost a tearjerker, man. It's just good to see there's just good people still in the world in that regard, man.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of good ones that are out there. And
absolutely,
what most people don't realize is there's probably more good than bad, but the good is very, very, very suppressed by some of the bad, and then the politics and the paperwork and stuff like that. That's the unfortunate thing, because if you do speak up, most of these people don't think, most of these officers don't think that they have other things that are out there in their life that they could do. They feel like they're stuck. They feel like this is the only job that they're going to have. This is the only job that they're ever going to have. And they've got kids. They're literally working second or third jobs just to be able to put food on their table. So when you're living paycheck to paycheck, a lot of people have to think, hey, if I say something, I literally could lose everything. So the reality is, as human beings, you generally look out for yourself. Period. You look out for yourself. You have to survive. And so part of survival is sometimes keeping your mouth shut. And keeping your mouth shut in some situations are sometimes the worst things that you can do. But it's also extremely fearful. It's extremely scary when you realize that opening up your mouth could now completely rip you from your job and your livelihood.
It changes everything when your actual livelihood is in question. You're looking at a human being that you brought into the. I don't even have kids, but I can understand what you're describing. When your livelihood is in question and something that you created is going hungry because you can't make enough money, and you are faced with the situation of choosing between your integrity or your child's stomach, and people usually choose the latter. Yep. But I know one thing's for sure, two things for certain: you would never have reached the millionaire. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You can never have reached the millionaire status had you still been a police officer.
No, unless I was doing real estate on the side as well. No, that would have never happened. I mean, you're talking, even with a college degree, I took a serious hit coming from finance and coming from corporate world, down to making about $43,000 a year. I literally can do one wholesale deal and make what a police officer makes an entire year. And I could make that just from sitting here at this desk in no time flat.
And I completely understand and agree. I've seen it happen.
Yep.
So back to the when things started going well. At what point did she start believing in what you were doing? Because before it starts working, it's all like, I gotta see it to believe it.
Yeah.
At what point did the narrative start changing, and we're at this point, January 8th is her last day?
So I would say, I've been talking about it for the last couple of years.
That's so
And
dope, bro. That's very dope, man. I love that shit.
I mean, I've been trying. What's really funny is one thing that really stopped her from maybe believing it, or just always having like, oh, well, there's one thing, there's this, there's this, there's this. But one thing that sounds really stupid to everybody that's listening is insurance, because we got medical insurance from her job, and that right there stopped her from even, I think, opening up to the idea of stepping away from work, all because of insurance. Well, I can tell you right now, which we're finally about to approve it, but it's probably going to be somewhere between 8 and 11 or $1,200 a month. Like one deal could cover my insurance for the entire year easily, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But from a W-2 mentality, how many hours do you have to work to make up for $1,000? That's a lot of time, right? And so
Absolutely.
other people, that's what they always think. They're always allowing themselves those types of things to block them from making themselves better because of that W-2 mentality. So I would say, honestly, probably about 6 to 7 months ago, when I really started pushing the transactional lending side. And for about 6 months to a year before that, I had not been talking about work as much. I've been trying to get away from being so one-sided, trying to spend a little bit more time with her. So it was probably about a year before I started doing the transactional lending that I slowly but surely saw her at least being open to me having conversations about her stepping away from her work. But the last 6 months, so right around June of this year, once she really started seeing what just the transactional lending could do, not even taking into consideration the wholesale business, the flipping business, the rental business, or some other side income I have, ignoring all those other things, it was just hearing what the transactional lending was doing really started opening up her mindset about it. And then probably the last 3 months was solid. And then out of nowhere, about 2 months ago, she was like, "So are you serious about this? Because I already had a conversation with my boss today." And I'm like, "Shit, we went from, I felt like we went from 0 to 100 in like one day." So it's one of those things where all of a sudden it's like the light went off, right? And it's like, boom, it's a reality. So it was kind of hard to see that it was naturally, slowly but surely, probably progressing inside of her, but she was never really talking about it so much. And then out of nowhere, it was like, oh, there's the reality. So that was her now actually seeing it and believing it. And now she can make a decision based off of me actually presenting her the facts.
That's beautiful, man. Did you do a victory dance inside?
By myself, yes, I did.
Nice, man.
See, if I would let her see it, she would have just said, "You a stupid fool. Maybe I should just go back and talk to the boss and stay at work and stuff." But it's been good, man. It's a whole lot better now, having her around a whole lot more. So I'm loving it, really am.
And you touched on something too, like again, back to the real estate of mind thing, of course. You mentioned that once you started closing deals at a more rapid pace, the like just the thought of the school loans like that, just removing those little things for the W-2 minded individuals, it helps a lot once you have a clearer mind. Because we're taught, and it's nobody's fault as far as there's nothing wrong with W-2 individuals, nothing like that. But we're definitely taught from a very young age to work for somebody else. So just the idea of going somewhere else or going on your own is very frightening, but it's extremely frightening for women. Like I can tell you that much in that regard. If they're not that there's not entrepreneurial women, of course, but if they have the W-2 mindset, and they're also females being the nurturers and the carers and the organizers that they are, they don't want to go out in the wild side. So the reason that I'm so in love that you even brought that up through passing during your conversation is what you fought through as a man in the house, where your spouse is making more than you while you're still chasing your goals. to end up becoming a millionaire and still have her there, it's a different kind of a love that was created and respect by both parties that I'm a huge, I was already a fan of yours, man, but now I'm like triple a fan of it. And that's outside of everything we already mentioned.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. For most women, they naturally are going to take less risk than men. I mean, I think that's just a statistic. It's also the reason why men die earlier and stuff like that is because we also we make a lot of decisions that aren't necessarily the best. And women,
there's way more homeless men than homeless women, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And women usually think through it a little bit more, and a lot of times they make wiser decisions.
Absolutely.
But in situations like this, I was willing to take a little bit more risk. I knew no matter what, I'd make it happen, no matter what it took. And even if my ideas that I had didn't pan out, I knew along the way I would adapt and find some other ways to make it work. So I never thought any different. It was
you were in your real state of mind.
Exactly right, 100%. Yeah, it was a little bit more challenging though. Sometimes feeling like I didn't have that support. That was very challenging. Even though I knew, like, I had that love and support, but I didn't have like the support for my work and what I was doing. And I also, again, going back to the expectations, right? The reason why I was disappointed so many times and it caused myself extra stress is because I was trying to push my goals and my thoughts and my future on her. Well, me running a real estate business she could care less about that kind of stuff. So I'm constantly expecting some type of feedback. I'm expecting her to sit down and maybe help me sometimes if I had a mental block or if I had a bad day and I needed some.
I'm struggling with the same shit, man. This is like a therapy session for me, man. I'm telling you.
So that's the thing is like I finally had to start realizing that, hey, instead of bringing it up to them, let them come to you. If they feel is a good time to finally start talking to you about it, let them bring it up to you. Other than that, just focus on you doing you. You know how to handle it. You're strong enough. You make it work. Don't rely on someone else who doesn't necessarily seem as interested. They might be interested, but again, maybe they need a little bit more time. They're not involved in it every single day. They may only hear about it 30 minutes a day. You hear about it 12 or 14 hours a day. So it's going to take them a lot longer of time before they finally catch up to where you're at. So you need to respect and give those other folks that space and that time before they, want to start talking about it. And honestly, one of the best things that you can do is, without trying to shove it down people's throat and make them be you, make them believe everything you believe, just let actions speak for themselves, right? Again, going back to the transactional lending side, right? So now that I finally had several months of doing it and she saw it without me having to bring it up, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I see what he's talking about. And now when they bring it up, they naturally want to talk about it a little bit more.
And they want to see where they can come in and help you take it to the next level.
Yep. So it's like, just do you, know where you're at, and don't worry about having that expectation of why isn't somebody else there helping you. Because guess what? If you force them to do it, they're probably not going to be good help, no matter who it is. If you force somebody to do something, they're not going to want to do it. And you're probably better off hiring somebody else or asking somebody else to do it who actually enjoys doing it, who wants to learn or whatever. Those are the types of people, like assistants or VAs or whatever. Let those people share some knowledge and stuff like that with you, because they want it. They're reading books. They want to listen. They want to learn. And that's going to be far better than a spouse who doesn't necessarily care about what you're doing. And I don't say that they don't care in a very negative way. It's just that that's not their dream. That's not their passion. So you should respect their passion. And while they respect your passion, it doesn't mean that they have to be involved either.
Absolutely. And to circle back to the transactional funding aspect itself, let's just walk through a random example, any amount of even numbers for the math of where you would come in, just in closing, so we could just bring it home, because I know your boss is coming home soon, and
she should be here any second.
Yeah. So just in closing,
I'm looking at a board now, and I probably have about 12 or 13. I just wiped off 3 today off the board, but a typical deal, let's just say it's a $200,000 a property. You've got it on a contract for $200,000 and you're selling it to your end investor for $220,000. So you know you're about to make $20,000 spread. You're going to probably lose about $1,000 in closing costs, insurance, and those types of things.
Money.
Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but you're going to probably end up losing around $1,000. So you're at $19,000 spread. My fee is a 1% fee, which is going to be $2,000. So now you're going to be at $17,000 versus not closing on the deal and making $0. So you're still going to walk away with 17 grand versus 0. It wasn't 20 grand, but at least you still got the deal. So that's pretty common. And usually it's same day. Sometimes it happens like the second day, maybe the third day, depending on the buyer and the seller and the closing attorney and recording title and things like that.
Nice, man. And you mentioned mentoring services. I wanted to also have you plug that as well. What do you mentor? And if you mentor transactional funding, do you not fear that you're creating your own competition?
So as far as me mentoring, I don't do one-on-one anymore. I work with a couple of my friends who run a very well-known group. It's called the Kingdom Real Estate.
Love the Kingdom. Love the Kingdom.
So yeah, I know you know about it, but some others obviously. And then one of the books by Todd Fleming is a really good friend of mine. If you can't wholesale after this, I've got nothing for you. And so I met those guys years and years ago. And every 3 months I go up to Ohio and spend time with them. And every Thursday I get on a call for an hour, hour and a half, and work with the wholesalers within that group. And so that's kind of my time mentoring there. But yeah, I no longer do any kind of one-on-one or anything. It wouldn't be worth the amount that someone would have to pay me for me to spend some time, unless it's like a big group like that. It just takes more time away from my lending, my business, and then spending time with my wife. And I know how it is.
Giving value to others. Absolutely, man. It's like, yeah, every word you said is like seeping, because it's like you're preaching nothing but, I would say, damn near spiritual facts, man. And so the name of the company that does the funding, temporary funding, and do you fund short sales or any other type of deals? Sure,
good question. So the company is very simple. It's Wholesalers Transactional Funding. And then I also have a KPI dashboard, Wholesalers KPIs. And that's a dashboard, but I'm probably about to start giving away Wholesalers KPI online dashboard for wholesalers away for free, and utilize that as a marketing tool for my transactional business. But the second part of your question there, starting Q1 of 2022, I will be working with a friend of mine, and we will be offering rehab loans for rentals, for fix and flips, and also some maybe gap and bridge loan opportunities as well. And so that's actually a really good future exit strategy for wholesalers here. Instead of, let's say, making $10,000 or $15,000 on a spread and selling it to an investor who is then going to flip it or whatever they might want to do, you can actually take some of these properties and list them, buy them, control them from your seller, and then list them, and then end up making more than you would have if you sold it to your investor. Let's face it, me as an investor, I'm never going to pay retail, but there's plenty of folks that are out there for one reason or another will pay at or above retail. So you can imagine if you list your property, you're going to have way more people looking at that property. And generally you're going to make a much larger spread on a listed property. So
it's going to give you more than one. It's going to give you, just to piggyback off that statement of how factual that is, it's going to give you more than one exit strategy as well.
Yep.
Moving forward, so no matter what, you have an option. And before you know the numbers in a deal, you know the options in a deal, because there's only but so many exit strategies you have as an investor. I would say about 4 total, maybe. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
wholesale, fix and flip, etc.
Yep. And then, and if you already have a buyer lined up, like let's say you already know a specific buyer's criteria, you've already sold to them, you already know that they can buy this house for 100. But let's say that instead of sharing it with them, you're like, okay, I already know my investor is going to be at 100 if I sold it to him today. So at least I'm at 100. Well, I bought it at 85, so I already know I'm going to be able to make money. So now let's say that your closing costs, your loan and all that, it brings you up to 90 grand, for example. So now you know that you're at least going to make $10,000 no matter what from your end buyer. But what the heck? Let me go ahead and control it and let me list it. So then you end up listing it and you sell it at 115. So now you take the 115 minus 6% commission. Let's just call it 7 grand. Now you're at 108. Now, instead of selling it to your friend at 100, now you sold it to a new investor buyer at 115, but you're walking away with 108. And so now you've just made 18 grand instead of 10 grand. And now you also have a new buyer who later on, if you want, if that person is always paying at or above retail, you can just go straight to him, not sell it on the MLS, not lose the 6% commission, and maybe give him a 3% cut compared to what he would have had to pay. So instead of paying 115, maybe you give it to him for 109, and you still make more money that way as well. So it's nice to have those types of exit strategies and thought processes, but until you've had, an experience like that or heard it from someone like us, that's not even usually on folks' radars.
That's amazing, man. Yo, Jesse, man, thank you so sincerely speaking, man. Thank you so much for your time today. I want to say, before I say the rest of what I'm about to say, the Haitian employee that you have, verbatim, tell her I said sac passe, okay?
I will have to remember that. So how do you pronounce it again?
Sac passe.
Sac passe.
There you go. Just say Len said sac passe. I'll send you the YouTube link. Tell her to go to just say that's that. But again, on a more serious note, man, sincerely speaking, man, the jewels you dropped today are amazing. I know a lot of people can get a lot of value from it. And I know that's like I call you the value giver, man. I love the fact that you were able to monopolize the idea and the fact that you're lending for transactional funding for others to close deals, but more importantly, to obtain your own goal, defend your household with a spouse that's supporting you. I love it, man. Keep going. I'm one of your biggest fans, brother. And just thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, man. Will do. I so much appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, brother.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon now.
You know it, man.